Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about cell phones and their frequency. We're going to discuss how frequency affects you mentally, physically, and emotionally.
Welcome to Renewed Hope Women's Wellness. I'm Happy Sperling, wife, mom of 7, board-certified holistic health practitioner, and owner of Renewed Hope Nutrition Center. After years of searching for the answers to my own health issues, I grew tired of always being told there was nothing wrong when I knew something wasn't right. If you're searching for answers too, this is the place for you. Whether you're a college student, mom, businesswoman, going through menopause, or anything in between, I'm here to empower you and teach you how to become your own health advocate. I'm here to renew your hope and let you know you are not alone. So let's start this journey together.
Now, unless you live under a rock, you probably have a cell phone. Pretty much everyone does nowadays. And honestly, sometimes it's hard to exist with one. How does a human exist in a world of buzzing wires and unpredictable robots when we were made from bits of Earth? Not only that, but we were designed for the wild, the beautiful, and the real. The rapid advancement of technology has ripped us up from our roots, literally. And yet, the rise in tech has had a positive impact as well. Our bodies crave balance, though, the equilibrium of slowing down and recharging. Our cell phones aren't the only things that need a battery boost. So today, we're going to talk about frequency, how it affects us, and how we can use technology for the greater good without losing ourselves in the process. We all know that cell phones work on radio frequency, and inevitably, it's disrupting your life, and it's causing unnecessary anxiety, overstimulation, and sleep deprivation.
Yeah, many biologists and electromagnetic field scientists believe the modulation of wireless devices makes the energy more biologically active, which interferes with our cellular mechanisms, opening calcium channels, for example, and allowing calcium to flow into the cell, into the mitochondria within the cell, which can interfere with our natural cellular processes and leading to the creation of stress proteins and free radicals, which can possibly cause DNA damage. In other cases, it may lead to cell death. So there's a real connection to the health of our cells and oxidative stress that's been based on frequency. But I know when you were researching for this, you were saying that there really hasn't been any government studies that have been funded by the government on cell phone use or frequency and how it affects health since the 90s?
Yeah, since the 90s, which is crazy because everything was just really starting to begin with cell phones and earbuds and technology that we have now. It's just advanced so much in the last 20, 30 years. The only real studies we have to go on are independent. So it's crazy, but from what I Googled and tried to find, I stumbled across an article written by Joel Moskowitz, and he is involved in the field of cancer research. So in 2001, based upon biologic and human epidemiologic research, low-frequency fields were classified as possibly carcinogenic by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC. In 2011, they classified radio frequency radiation as possibly carcinogenic to humans based upon studies of cell phone radiation and brain tumor risk in humans. Currently, we have considerably more evidence that would warrant a stronger classification.
Yeah, and there's also been a case study done by the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, which analyzed the damage in a cell caused by cell phone radiation and the link to cancer. And Joel and his partners found that cell phone radiation not only disrupted normal cell growth and DNA, that's a big deal, it also increased the chances of brain tumors by 60%. I would argue that this is a good reason to implement a healthy distance from our little boxes.
If an increased risk of cancer wasn't enough of a reason to cut back on screen time, there's a nice little bundle of other reasons that should cause you to rethink the role of constant cell phone use.
Yeah, I was looking at an NIH study that was done years ago. It was actually done on a mouse model. And it was fascinating because the study that they used was 2400 megahertz of cell phone radiation and the effects on the structural integrity of the hippocampus, so the part of the brain that it's actually two parts, a right and left hippocampus, which is part of the limbic system in the brain. Humans and mammals have two hippocampi, one on each side of the brain, which plays an important role in short-term and long-term memory and spatial memory that enables navigation. So to take a break from that for just a second, I thought about all the people in practice that come in and say, I just feel like my brain health is not what it's supposed to be. Like I can't keep my thoughts clear. I have trouble focusing. And of course, we're trying to find out all the connections hormonally or nutritionally that could be the cause of that and supporting. But when I really dug into this study, I thought, isn't it fascinating that the part of the brain that was studied in this NIH, so you're not talking about a right-wing study, I mean, it's an NIH study that is published in the medical journals, was saying that they noticed in this mouse model that there was a huge problem with the structural integrity of the hippocampus by cell phone radiation. So they took these mice and they had one group that they exposed to the radiation and they gave them a maze to do. And then they had one group that they had no radiation exposure and they gave them the same maze. And they actually measured the anxiety that each group felt when they were having to get to the end of the course. And the ones who had the radiation, which was 24 megahertz, they had intense anxiety, they displayed behavioral problems, even anger. And the other group finished the maze with just the normal amount of stress that you would have when you were presented with any kind of a challenge. So the fact that the hippocampus actually controls spatial navigation, so the ability to look at a situation and be like, okay, here's where we are and this is where we need to be. What do we need to do in the meantime to get there? That's that part of the limbic system is the hippocampus. And not only that, but the ability to make decisions to get from point A to point B was affected. And yeah, that's a mouse model, but humans and mammals share this limbic system, hippocampus. So if I can talk, they share the hippocampus, which is part of the same limbic system. They literally came to the end of the study and said that there's no doubt that this level of radiation affected the structural integrity of the hippocampus, which led to significant behavioral changes such as anxiety. It alerted us too that that's just a short-term study. There were no studies done on the long-term effects of that. I think so many times we're so quick to pick up our phone to check this or check that or Google something or do research. But when you think about the average teenager spends 6.5 hours a day on their cell phones. And how is that affecting them if you had this happening for an hour with exposure, but then you're having this go on for all day long and we're kind of checking that? There was a study that was done by Dr. Cheever and she actually got some college students to participate in a study and she didn't really tell them what the dynamics of it was. They were doing an anxiety study and she hooked them up to kind of like a lie detector where she was doing heart rate variations when they were presented with certain stressors. And the study is fascinating because all she did was sit with them. She hooked them up to the system and she took their cell phone and said, I'm going to need to put that over there while we do the study. So she didn't prep them for it ahead of time on purpose. When they laid the study over, and this was actually on an ABC News report, when they laid the phone over there, she began to text and call their cell phone. They didn't know it was her. So they were just getting those notifications and the heart rate changes were out the roof, like a crisis amount, really. So it was this level of anxiety that they had present with their phone, but then when it was taken away from them, it was even a greater anxiety. So then we're presented with, the more people use their phone, the more anxious they are about using their phone. Yeah. And that's kind of what she concluded. And I thought, wow, what do you do if being away from it, we're so trained that we need that stimuli, and yet it's overwhelming us because we weren't created for that much stimuli. So I think the health risk of it are probably not going to be presented as they truly are because you and I talked about it. It interferes with marketing.
Yeah, it really does. They compared it to big tobacco, which is one of the reasons, it's conspiracy, but pretty much the truth that they just decided to stop studying frequency because if the truth were to get out about how harmful cell phone frequency is to the human body, then, things would be really bad and they would lose a lot of money. I mean, I guess we're so addicted now. I don't really see people just dropping their cell phones. It's kind of like cigarettes. It's hard to quit.
Oh yeah, and that dopamine hit you get every time, and we've talked about that, is there's a release and then an intensity that happens when it's not there. So it does create this cycle where, very much like someone would go to have something sweet if they're craving it, and then they need it again an hour or a few minutes later. Or with nicotine, if you're a smoker or a vapor or an alcoholic, we don't like to clump it all together, but all of those things tap dopamine, and it gives our body that immediate gratification, even if it's just for an instant. And so we're trained habitually to look for that. And of course, the more we tap a dopamine receptor, the more we need to do the next time to get that same dopamine response. So I think it is set up that way, honestly, because it's really difficult to have that time away. The interesting thing about that study, which I was in shock, was that when I looked at the megahertz that they tested this study for the mice model, it was 2400 megahertz. So a megahertz is the millions of cycles per second that the frequency comes through. But 5G runs on 28 gigahertz. So gigahertz is billions of cycles per second. So this study was done on mice that had 2400 megahertz, and then we're doing 5G, even 4G, but 5G running on 28 to 39 billion instead of the million study. So to give you an idea, the cell phone test that they did there with radiation is equal, 2400 megahertz is equal to 2.4 gigahertz, and 5G phones run on 28 to 39 gigahertz. So they were getting these levels and studies on a very low frequency compared to what we're exposed to now. And no one's talking, well, I won't say no one, there's a few people. And unfortunately, most of it's coming from those who have a product to sell to help you maybe change the frequency level or how it affects your body. Right. And I'm not against those. We're actually going to link them, because I think anything we can do to try to cut down on that. But you would also have to pull out the use of it too, because even if you get something on your device that limits the exposure, that's wonderful when you have to be on your device. But then you also have to have that discipline to say, I'm going to turn off the data, which you were saying too, that when your data is roaming, that it actually emits more frequency with your cell phone.
Yeah, there's a lot more radiation coming through the phone if you're in a place with like a dead signal for a long time. So airplane mode will be your best friend. Wi-Fi is honestly much safer than cell phone radiation. It's not amazing, but it's better to use your phone on Wi-Fi if you can.
Lower frequency, and of course I think I saw in your research that they would actually need 800,000 new cell antenna sites to run 5G over the 3 and 4G.
Which they're in the process of putting up,
So that's not even part of the conversation, is like, well, what does that emit for us?
Like, are we just going to blow the planet up? I mean, 5G is kind of scary if you research it. And we're not trying to go like all tinfoil hat, like conspiracy, because we understand you have to live your life. This is 2024. You need a cell phone, most likely, if you have a job, like it's just the way you clock in sometimes, or correspond with your boss or clients or coworkers. And I mean, your schedule's on it, calculator, calorie counter, your bank account, like everything. It kind of freaks me out. Like, what if we lost? What if everything just, what if we lost our connection? Yeah. Just thinking about it, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to pay for groceries without my,
Yeah, we're definitely in a dependent mode with it. But I do think, and I talked to you about trying to stick to our purpose on the podcast, which is to help people be their own health advocate, as to whether I should do this one or not. But I feel like you can't avoid it, because it's a free thing that you can do for yourself that doesn't require an appointment with a naturopath, like, any of the other things that we do. It's just, please know that there is definite research that is confirming over and over again that we weren't meant to be this connected to frequency levels all the time. And I know it sounds a little weird when we talk about frequency and energy. Nobody thinks about it when you're talking about frequency in a cell phone. We know it's frequency. If you don't have a signal, you don't have use of that phone.
Right.
But we also have energy and frequency within us, which is how we're created. If you're not alive, then you're dead, and that would be safe to say there's no frequency there. But we kind of get a little bit leery of like acknowledging that we are energy and that literally that's how we're created. And if we argue with that and you cease to have energy, then you're dead. So you know that there was definitely something to that. But if we have that, then we know that frequencies can be interrupted. It happens all of the time. Just go out of service range. And then we don't even think about acknowledging that, that frequency's gone there, but it was there before. But with our bodies, we underestimate the power of frequency. And I know you and I were talking about the Rife machine that is based on frequency that has been used to heal cancer.
Right.
And it uses frequency. And so that's an amazing thing. And it was discovered years ago by a doctor that everyone pretty much, and his name was Dr. Rife, as is the name of the machine. That is fitting. But everyone ridiculed him terribly. Like, what do you mean you found a frequency to heal cancer? What he found was that if you applied certain frequency levels to the human body, and he was doing it with a machine, that your cells could actually pick up frequency. And what he found was as you adjusted that cancer cells, which are kind of like cheater cells, they hijack an energy system and they do their own thing and they go through a Krebs cycle that's different, so they can be really lazy, and that's why they can multiply over and over again. What he found was that there was a level of frequency that cells that were healthy could actually move and flow to that a cancer cell would be destroyed by. Wow. And he used that therapy, and it was non-invasive, no side effects, and he used that to actually help people heal from cancer. So I think about that in the research you did. I think it's not odd to think that if a frequency can heal a cell, we also have to understand that frequency can destroy a cell or mutate a cell. And that's what cancer is. It's a mutation in a healthy cell. It continues to replicate an unhealthy cell, which is where you get tumors. So when you start thinking about it like that, it really changes how we use frequency in our everyday life, what we can do to try to prevent the overexposure, which I try to limit my cell phone use. I'm very, very strategic on the weekends to move my cell phone away, turn off the data and the Wi-Fi, and get outside and do things where I don't answer the phone. Of course, there's this level of what if someone needs me? Your dad has a phone, one of us usually. Yeah. And the good thing about cell phones is you can get a call most of the time. You don't need data or any Wi-Fi on that, but it's just to put it away for a while and let your body have that time to heal. They've actually, at the Mayo Clinic now, they've renamed it, but they're doing a type of therapy, like Rife therapy machine, and they're actually coupling it with another treatment plan, but it's a non-invasive immunotherapy now. So they've acknowledged, and not only acknowledged, that there are frequencies of healing, and that they're now using that in cancer therapies in the U.S., which is really exciting. I don't know that they gave Dr. Rife complete credit for it, but I think they did. They cited it, but they've changed how they've used it. But brain cancer, which is one of the most difficult cancers to deal with, is on the rise in young people. You talked about with your earbud, anyone's earbud, put it right in there. Target it right to the brain, and we think, oh, well, they're safe, or they wouldn't sell them, right?
Well, that's what we'd like to think. But I was wearing earbuds for about 8 to 9 hours a day, exercising, walking, chores.
Listening to podcasts.
Yeah, and then I, tried to incorporate them with work, but then I was like, I started getting cystic acne around my ears, and then I noticed Andrew Huberman started talking about cystic acne and the link between that and using earbuds, and it kind of made me wonder. I'm like, oh, there's some kind of toxicity here that,
wow, right.
It's painful to have cystic acne all the time.
Well, and I think, too, if you're on the phone using a speakerphone, and the further away we can have our phone from our actual person, like right up against our head, is not the best plan, because it is a form of radiation and you're putting it in a targeted place. And so it doesn't fix it to use the speaker, but it definitely helps instead of just having something that you have that close to our brain. Because if we know through research that it disrupts healthy cell patterns, we also know that cancer is cell mutation, then why would we think that it wouldn't be connected? And the bad thing is, I don't think we know, because no one's really spending the money on the research because of the implications of, can you imagine if we had to scale back and try to do something for our health, which I don't know if we're too far in now.
I know. You can just look at our diet and see what, provides in the grocery stores and realize that why would they study cell phones?
Yeah, if you can't even trust what's in the skincare products because they're really not regulated. But now we have something that is really bigger than we are, and we're probably not going to see a lot of change in that unless there's some significant studies done, and even you have to follow the money a lot of times, So.
Well, yeah, even if you started communicating with a carrier pigeon and living in a cabin, way out in the woods, we're still going to be surrounded by frequencies.
I would like to do that sometimes. But I think I sent you that video of the guy that's he does a little frequency. I can't believe I don't know his name at the moment because I didn't have that in the notes. But
he's a great guy.
Yeah, it's with the Audubon. David. Why do we not know his name right now? I'm going to have to look it up and get some cell phone
I know you guys are probably screaming his name right now.
David Attenberg, and I didn't even have to. It came to me. So see, maybe I've had my phone too close to me today. My brain, my hippocampus wasn't functioning 100%. Anyway, he did a short video. It was fascinating, and I sent it to you on the flower that he hooked the little frequency line to, and the bees, and he actually showed the frequency had a volume or a sound, and it was amazing that it actually put out almost like a humming sound, and it drew the bee in. And then when the bee had pollinated it, he kept the same frequency measure on it. The flower actually changed the sound that it was emitting through its energy, and it let the bee know that, hey, we don't need to come to this flower because it's already been pollinated. And so they wouldn't waste energy on that flower, and also that the bee had a charge that was actually absorbed by the flower. I mean, there is so much more to this world than we even can imagine.
Yeah.
But if you think about, if a flower emits a frequency and we emit frequency, then something that disrupts that frequency is probably not a good thing. So I think, you had a list of, well, what can we do? Because you're always like, it's fine to paint the picture, but don't let's leave them with a doomsdayer. And so we talked about a little bit of it, but what were your thoughts on what we could actually do? Practical things.
Yeah, I mean, of course, airplane mode will be your best friend. Using Wi-Fi instead of data, if you can afford the Wi-Fi. I would say definitely keeping your phone 10 inches away from you. Don't carry it around in your pocket close to you. Try and put it in your purse. I think that would be the best idea. And try not to scroll for any more than like a half hour. I know that even that's pretty crazy, but I know I can scroll for up to 3 hours a night sometimes, especially when I just can't sleep or don't want to do anything else but go on my phone. I could be reading a book, but I guess that's a dying art. With cell phones. But I mean, I know we were going to talk about grounding in our next podcast.
Yeah. And how grounding can be used to actually level out exposure to radiation. So frequency in our phone, if you have to have x-rays, that grounding I'm so excited to talk about next time because it's one of those other free things you can do that is so valuable for your health. But we'll have to get into that more and how you can do it. But I mean, we're not going to go cell phoneless. I mean, so many of our jobs and our work, or even your desktop, your computers, which do tend to have a little less frequency than that, but we're surrounded by it all. So just finding space outside of that, go outside. Turn your phone off at night. I know that there have been studies that people who leave their phone on next to them during the night, they measure brainwave frequency and they know that you stay there's stimuli. So that means you never get into like a deep sleep. And that's a big deal. Not to mention, why have radiation exposure that's extra while you're sleeping? You're not using the phone anyway. Well, let's hope you're not, unless you're real coordinated. But a lot of times people check their phone during the night. And, a lot of teens do that. It's almost like they'll sleep for a little while and then they'll check their phone if there's a notification. Just shut it all down. Pretend like everything is not working and you can just have a night where you don't have the exposure 6 to 8 hours at least. I mean, that would be huge if everybody would just turn off your data and your Wi-Fi and even turn off your Wi-Fi internet boxes, any of that. Just shut them off because then at least you don't have that signal going through when you're not using it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Why have it running all day? And try not to check your phone phone as soon as you get up, as soon as your feet hit the floor. It's hard not to, especially if you have a really busy job, demanding tasks. But maybe just first half hour, don't look at it. I know that's helped me.
Yeah, challenge yourself. I'll challenge myself. I've done that before, and I'm amazed at how quickly you just habitually look and check things, even if it's emails or messages coming in. But to just have that time where it's like, what if this didn't exist? What would I do? And I think a lot of us would be a lot more resourceful if we didn't have the option to just mindlessly scroll, covered and surrounded with information but never knowledge. Like it's just like we have so much access, but it doesn't really cause action most of the time.
Yeah.
So exactly. shut her down for a few, as the old saying goes. Well, next week we're going to talk about grounding, and I'm so excited about that.
Yeah,
and
I'm excited too.
So everybody do what you can. That's all that any of us can do. We're not going to go live under a rock, as Kayla said, but we do actually need to be mindful, because that is a big way that we can take care of ourselves, and it's absolutely free. No cost to you, but it has a lot of benefits.
Thank you so much for listening. If this podcast inspired you or encouraged you in some way, please leave us a review or share this episode with a friend. If you need help connecting the dots of your own health journey, I would love to help you with that. You can reach me via the link below to set up a one-on-one consultation. You can also connect with us by joining our free Facebook community, which is linked below, or at healthywithhappysperling.com. Until next time.